I had to take a couple days off. I had some health issues, but I'm back. And this has had plenty of time to sit and get ready for the next step. Now, since we're going to start on the flower, and looking at the reference photo, I like the yellow rose. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's a lot of the same values. If I changed this to black and white, there would not be a whole lot of difference between this part of the petal and this part. You can see some, sure, and there's some like, I don't know, brownish red coloration on the tips of the petals. The stamens have sort of a reddish, rustish color to them. I mean, if you really look hard, you can pick out some colors, but I find this is not really an exciting reference. Other than the shape's nice, sure, when we looked at it, it was a beautiful flower. But as far as art goes, I think that's a little bit unexciting. So what I want to do is I'd kind of like to use the yellow as a kind of a base color, but I would like to add some other colors and nuance it a little bit, give it something a little exciting. And when it comes to art, it's up to the artist often to decide what they would like to see in a painting or drawing. Unless you're being paid to do something that's exactly like your reference, such as a portrait, you can really go wild with these kind of things. So what I would like to do, I gotta figure out which brush would be best because the petals are in various sizes. I kind of think this one is the one I want. Check this one. That one's got a shorter. Yeah, I'll try the shorter one. I haven't used it yet. It's still got the stuff they put on it from the store. Let me wet it a bit. What I'm going to do is like a flat wash of the yellow and let it dry on each petal, and then do the glazing method. Now, one of the reasons I want to do glazing is because since I'm testing the ground, and most of the paintings I would do with the ground, if I use it again, would probably have glazing. This in some way is glazed in that first I did the drop-in method, kind of to let it scatter around and do crazy things, but then I went back in and glazed a little bit to give it more depth, and then not exactly a glaze, but put the little bokeh things on it. But then glazing, we take the paint and just carefully fill in an area and try to make sure that there's no hard lines unless you want there to be hard lines. I kind of want a hard line at the end of the petals because I'm going to use some different colors. Maybe even some of the watercolor pencil might even lift into it. And then with this thing, ooh, it's still sticky. After I get the glaze on and it dries, I'm going to yank this thing up and see if it worked with the ground. And then also maybe draw in the shape of the little ladybug or whatever I decide on there. If it does not work and it pulls the ground up, then I'll probably just try to glaze over it and make the best of it, you know, as an experiment, and not go with trying to make a design or anything. So let's get some water. Now the colors I chose, it's kind of a limited palette, are variations of a warm, soft reddish and yellowish tones, a little bit of violet for making the darker shaded areas. If I mix the violet with this coral-like, I notice it makes a beautiful shade for where the shadows fall. I may not need a whole lot of shadows in this because the way the rose is facing, there's not a lot of dark areas. They're kind of just slightly darker, and sometimes you can achieve that just with doing the various washes, but I don't you know, like I say, I just think that's going to be kind of boring. So I'm going to put a little bit of this yellow on here. It looks kind of bright, but I think when it dries and I start glazing with some of these other nuances, it's going to be less bright. This is lemon yellow. Now, I can tone it down slightly with its opposite, but I'm afraid it's going to be too strong. I can put a little tiny bit of the coral in and warm it up a little bit, or cold it up, whatever. There. Now it looks a little more like gold. Let's go with that. Let me wet it a little more. Now, to glaze, I just want a nice even coat. And some of that watercolor pencil I see is already lifted into it. That's fine. By the time I'm done glazing several layers, if I choose to do so, you won't even know that's there. Now, when we glaze, we want to go mostly in kind of one direction and try to keep the paint moving, because if you don't, you're going to have hard lines. Sometimes you still get hard lines, but you're far less likely to. And we want to be careful about dragging other paints in, because watercolor can be re-wet, and it absolutely will pick up the other colors. And I don't want to paint over that any more than I can help, because it is sticky. I think that'd make a cute ladybug there, if it doesn't lift up the ground. If it does, I'm not sure. Okay, so that looks pretty even. It looks very intense. When it dries, it will be lighter. And like I say, when I go over it with these other washes, you're going to see a shape come out. Now, one thing I want to do, everything's unhandy when it's under the camera. That petal is this petal here. And you can see the light hits here. And the color's a little bit less intense. We can wet the brush, take off any excess water, and lightly go over that. And it doesn't really show up very well, I don't think. But if you do that, you can pull up some of the paint, and it will allow it to show more of the stuff underneath. This is more of a intense yellow, so I don't think it's going to show up there. I can see it, but I don't know if you can see it on the film. So maybe when it dries, I can do a little better lifting to where it's more visible. But for now, I'm going to leave it at that. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and do some of these other petals, and then I'll come back. I don't want to film every step of what I'm doing with this, because I think it'll be extremely boring, because there's going to be a lot of letting it set and dry between. So let me do a little further, and I'll come back later and show you about the rest of the glazing. Well, since the last filming, I was working at the painting the yellow on there, and the little sample of the resist that I'd put on there started to tear up my paintbrush, and I didn't realize it till I started seeing little parts of the brush falling apart. So I said, I'm going to have to either throw this out or revise yet again. So that's what I did. This is actually still a little wet. I just finished this second iteration. So what I did is I peeled off that resist, which was a mess. It did not want to come off. And when it did, it was, I don't know how to describe it. But I think the problem is the bottle of resist is really, really old. I think if I had a newer bottle, it would have worked fine. But what I did, instead of throwing it out, I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this happen. So I did another layer of the ground, the watercolor ground on it, because that sticky, nasty gooey stuff. I couldn't get it up no how. It did not pull up the ground that I had previously, but it did make like a layer of that goo all over. When I put the new ground just on the flower area, that seemed to work. Now, I did notice as I was painting, the ground did what gesso does for me, and very tiny little, almost sponge-like crevices and cracks show up after it's dry. Like it shrinks maybe. And so I think that is maybe the nature of the ground. Anyway, to try to save this, I decided that let's look at something that's a little less complicated. I was trying to define where the petals began and end with that. When the flower was live, you could tell, but it's one of them kind that had petals everywhere. So I sat down and I drew and I drew and I drew till I was satisfied that I had something that I kind of liked. So I did an initial drawing and printed it out to see on the computer if I could maybe line up the balance a little better. But then I decided heck with it. This is my sketch, and so I just sketched it out on here. I tried to transfer it, but I don't know if it's the ground or what. It didn't transfer well, so I had to freehand it. So therefore, it's not a perfect rose. Definitely not. And I decided this pale color wasn't getting it for me. Since it was my painting, I decided if I wanted to make the rose look a certain way, I can make it look a certain way. So that's what I did. I decided to give it sort of a flaming, smoldering appearance. And there's a little place where the petal is damaged. I wanted it to not be perfectly healthy. So I put on damage, although it doesn't translate well as that. And then I put the leaves in, but I kept them kind of muted to the background because I still wanted to have the bokeh effect. Did not sign it. So I waited until I had the camera on to do this part, because it seems like all the art videos, they want to do this part on camera. So this is the big reveal. Now this may be where it all goes bad, who knows. Given my track record, it's highly possible it could all go bad. Try not to. I put the tape all the way around. That's not very pro, is it? Maybe I should have did this off camera. But where would be the fun in that, huh? Frankly, I think if art isn't fun in some respect, it's really not any point in doing it. Ooh, it's wanting to tear the paper a little. So this is cotton paper. Ooh, look at that. So maybe that's something to put in the notes to be watchful for. But the ground, and I don't know if it had anything to do with that or not. That could just be because the tape is not that great. I'm even tearing it the way you're supposed to tear it for watercolors. Well, any color paint. Well, it was a practice thing anyway, so frankly, I think it was somewhat of a success. We got a painting out of it. We salvaged this messed up paper, and I don't think it looks too horrible. The stem's kind of fading into the background because paint does change color as it dries. And I have a kind of an unusual technique when I watercolor paint. I still kind of stuck in the acrylic and drawing mode in my mind. So I tend to use it drier and thicker. So has more of the dry brush technique. So you may notice that it looks more like acrylic perhaps, although there is no acrylic paint in this at all. It's all watercolor. Alright, well, I hope this has been a fun experiment for you as well as me, and I'll see you in another video.